You're listening to Expertly Said, a podcast on the art and impact of communication. I'm Kristen Sweeney, founder and CEO of Every Little Word. My guest today is Evon Burton, Associate Director of Patient Marketing at Bristol Myers Squibb. Evon is an accomplished marketing and communications leader with more than a decade of experience driving patient and consumer-centered strategy across biotech, pharmaceutical, nonprofit, and cultural sectors. At Bristol Myers Squibb, Evon leads integrated initiatives that connect brand strategy with real patient needs, blending data-driven insight, cultural fluency, and regulatory rigor. Previously at Merck, Evon shaped national healthcare consumer strategies within the HIV portfolio, developing culturally resonant campaigns and expanding digital engagement into emerging platforms to deliver compliant, high-impact work at scale. Evon led crisis communications for Philadelphia Fight during the COVID-19 pandemic and built trusted, community-based outreach programs focused on access, equity, and prevention. He's also a committed arts advocate who has served on the City of Philadelphia's Arts and Culture Task Force and consistently champions the role of creative expression in community building and public storytelling. Evon's work has been recognized by organizations including the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists and Harvard Business Review, and he remains dedicated to advancing patient advocacy, health equity, and the arts as interconnected drivers of meaningful change. Evon, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to have this conversation. So we've heard already the kind of key touch points of a really interesting career journey, but I'd like to go back a bit further
Yeah.
to the origins. Tell us how you ended up in marketing and communications.
Well, that's a really good question. It started in 2009 when I was a senior at Morehouse College. Um, if you think about the year 2009, that was the beginning of the Great Recession. We were I like to think of this as millennials as the generation of broken promises. So, you know what I
Fun.
mean? Right, right. Like when you're supposed to go to college, you're supposed to start your career, you're supposed to get a job. In my juvenile mind, you're supposed to get a BMW and make six figures and have no worries in the world. But literally none of that was provided for us. We got our degrees and they said, "Hey, there are no jobs, so figure it out." And I just remember going to interview after interview, not getting the job, but more importantly, not really feeling connected to the role that I was applying for and interviewing for at that time. So I started thinking about like what I was really interested in at that time. And I had always loved the work of nonprofits. There were plenty that had gotten me to that point. And what was more interesting was that Philadelphians or people overall had very little awareness of these organizations, one, but more importantly, the life changing work they were doing. So I kind of created like this little mission statement for myself or this hypothesis for myself to figure out like what would happen if these organizations received more had more increase in awareness. I had no idea where that hypothesis would lead me, but I knew that that's what would be something that I would love to do. And so I stopped the interview process while I was a senior. I started telling people like, this is what I'm thinking. I'll never forget there was a Morehouse brother that was like, "So you want to be broke for the rest of your life?" And he wasn't fully wrong there. But I knew that this was something that could open doors for me in some way. But more importantly, like help various communities overall. So for me it started with an unpaid internship after graduating at the American Red Cross in Philadelphia. And I think I was only there like 3 months, and I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like, this
Wow.
is amazing. So, there was a job in between, but when I made the decision, okay, I need to get back and have that feeling when I was working at the Red Cross. So I literally built a communications career on my own, with the help of the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists and the Black Public Relations Society. I used what I knew to help help various organizations in the city of Philadelphia get the awareness from a media perspective and a social media perspective that I felt they needed. So I worked with organizations such as Achievability, which is an interesting hybrid of a education and housing program. I worked with independent artists, choreographers, and event planners and whatnot. And then ultimately, that led me to Philadelphia Fight, which is the city's largest HIV serving organization, where I was there for 7 years.
Wow. I love I mean, it's so interesting just to go back to where you started when you talked about the Great Recession as a pivot point. Had a little bit of a different experience, but still one that's very much shaped by those events. I was graduating grad school for musical theater and I was moving to New York.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
it was very interesting because obviously I'm moving to New York to be an actor. Everyone has told you that's hard.
Mhm.
And so I didn't really know quite what to expect, and I didn't have any trouble picking up the kind of, like, side work, gig work that actors do. There's
Right.
plenty of that for people who are able to show up reliably, and,
Mhm.
um, but I remember a few months in, like, talking to people who'd been around a lot longer, and they were like, "No, no, it's hard, but it's never been this hard. Theaters are
Mhm.
closing their doors left and right." Like, and I kind of had this, like, naivete of I didn't know. I was like, "Oh, I
Mhm.
guess it's just really hard, like, really,
Mhm.
really hard," and so it's interesting because it just kind of, like, shaped my early experience there, and on the one hand, I was inexperienced, um, but on the other hand, I was, even before I knew it, very much being impacted by what was,
Yeah.
like, the kind of um the bigger economic landscape. So I love that you talk to, and, like, proud millennial here as well, and I think the need to be passionate about what we do and to have that connection, like, this is a positive. We get, dinged for it a little bit sometimes, but, tell us a little bit about Philadelphia Fight,
Mhm.
um, and because then I wanna get into, like, your switch to kind of the pharma side, and it sounds like this was maybe a transition point.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that work and what it was like to be there in the midst of the pandemic, where you've got a whole other phenomenon, social, economic, cultural, everything else happening at the same time.
Mm. So let me first mention how I got to Philadelphia Fight.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
it's so interesting how people see you and then pull you when they see that you have like a particular talent. A dear friend and form who was the wife of one of my colleagues at Achievability, and she's like, "Hey, I like you. You're doing an amazing job. We need you at Philadelphia Fight." And so she literally like recruited me to come to that organization. And when went to Philadelphia Fight, as a gay black man, I knew of HIV. I knew of the risks. But I knew it from this state of like being like a gay man. Um, However, like I'll never forget that first day walking into the office and seeing the amount of black people that were walking through the door. And it made me question, like, yes, this is a LGBTQ story, like, considering the HIV focus and who HIV impacts, but it's almost equally a Black African American issue. And
yeah,
so at that time, I had built great relationships with the African American press here in Philadelphia. And I sought it my mission to connect Philadelphia Fight to the Black community as much as possible. So over those 7 years, I made sure that every journalist, but particularly African American and LGBTQ journalists knew fight in a deeply personal level, but based on who the population Philadelphia Fight was serving. So literally like 6 weeks in, I was able to land the first story, the first local TV story on PrEP. And this is when PrEP was the Philadelphia Fight was the only organization in the state of Pennsylvania prescribing PrEP.
Oh,
um,
wow.
Mind you, again, I was 6 weeks into the role and I barely had an idea of what PrEP was. All I knew was that this is something that was big and major that people needed to talk about. So now, everybody kind of knows what PrEP is. That PrEP is on TV. There's commercials. There's state, city campaigns behind it. Um, Back then, nobody knew, and nobody was promoting it except Philadelphia Fight in the greater Philadelphia area. So from then on, I always was able to like find those unique stories and to make sure that Philadelphia Fight was at the center of anything innovative and progressive in the HIV movement. Um, and so again, like that's what started my career at Philadelphia Fight, and then uh, around that time, Fight was also a fairly new FQHC organization. So, for those who don't know, the FQHC status, the Federally Qualified Health Center status, is a grant from the federal government that allows community organizations to see anybody and everybody, regardless of insurance or the ability to pay. So through that designation, we were able to open additional clinics with key focuses such as expanding outside of HIV, and having like primary care to anybody and everybody, dental care, programming for behavioral health, anything like you could think of. Fight did it, and we were able to put campaigns and promote it in a lot of ways. So I really got the on the ground training and promoting to very different marginalized communities, which of course I still now use now in my farming career. But I learned all of that at Philadelphia Fight during those 7 years. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had, but some of the hardest as well. Um, as nonprofit professionals, you have 10 million jobs under one.
Uh-huh.
So I learned I was everything from a Marcom professional also to crisis comms. There was a big neighborhood issue in the city of Philadelphia. I believe what was that, 2015, 2016. My organization kind of got swept in that. So I had to gain some crisis comms experience, cleaning that up. But also, I was a director of comms when during the pandemic, and which was very one
We
of
were
the
all in
most.
crisis. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we were definitely all in crisis. But what was so interesting about Philadelphia Fight, I'll never forget speaking with Jane, who was the CEO at the time. She's since retired. And I'll never forget my last day in the office before we quote unquote closed our doors. And I'll say quote unquote in the for I'll put a like an asterisk there for a second. But I'm like, this sounds like from my research very, very, very close to what happened in the early days of the HIV epidemic, where there was this panic, there was limited information, and people were getting stigmatized. Oh my God, they have COVID, they were doing unsafe activities, they were outside, they were on planes, they were doing all these things that were normal, but they were being demonized, which is exactly what happened with the HIV epidemic in those early days. And she was like, Evan, you're exactly right. And so she's like, what we can't do is like lean into the panic. So, and she's like, what we also can't do is close our doors permanently for people who are at most risk of COVID, because it's research was showing that in deep urban settings, like COVID was uh, running rampant, and that was our population at Philadelphia Fight. So if someone didn't have insurance or couldn't make it to a hospital, if they had HIV and were very comfortable in going to Philadelphia Fight, they needed a place to go. So Fight technically remained open. Now the primary, so we turned our medical offices into these like triage centers.
Wow.
They had our doctors were wearing N95. There were on and off shifts, but everybody who had a more administrative role, um, they worked remotely for the first time ever. The federal government were allowing telehealth for the first time ever for FQACs. So we implemented that. We turned all of our supportive services virtual. And again, all of this happened in a matter of 7 days. So the communication challenge was one, telling people that we were remaining open because all of our competitors were closing. They said, "Hey, this is too unsafe for us." That's a whole nother conversation, but we wanted to stay open. That was one. And then two, informing all of our patients and program participants that we were still here for them. So that's exactly what we did. Jane and I wrote this very, very, very forceful letter that talked about why we were opening our doors. Journalists literally took that statement and put it on their own publications because they're like, this is amazing. But then Jane, as the innovator that she is, said, "Hey, I think that there's more that we can do as an organization, especially an organization that that had HIV testing as a as a core program at some point. Like, what can we do to provide testing to the communities in which we serve?" So we were the second big community organization to provide free COVID testing in the city. The first was, I believe, the Black Doctors Consortium that Ayla Stanford created. We were the second, so we split
Wow.
the city in two, and we hit up all these places and offered tests to anybody and everybody who needed it. Because even though the world was quote unquote shut down, there were people who had essential jobs that needed to get to work and needed to know their status. And this is before COVID tests were being shipped to people's homes through the federal government. So that was a whole nother thing that we had to communicate out to the public here in Philadelphia. So I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And I know I'm like rambling, but
No, no, no. This is
yeah,
fascinating. And I mean, it's, also taking me back, and I'm sure listeners as well. Like when you're talking about shipping, this is when like we didn't know if we could touch mail. I mean,
right.
in those
Hmm.
early days. And I think it sounds like Philadelphia Fight was already a very agile organization that had
Yeah.
had experience expanding services and being flexible, but
Hmm.
you kind of take for granted now. I've worked remotely like long before it was cool. Um, and I think now we're so post-pandemic virtually oriented, but you kind of forget like how big of a shift it would be even to say we still have our services, but now we have to take them online and we have to set up the platforms and they have to be secure and they have to protect, health information, and our patients have to have the internet connections and like
Hmm.
all of those logistics and the sheer speed. We have there's a client that we work with, and they're in automation and digital transformation, and they were really
Hmm.
critical in getting the facility up and running to produce the Moderna vaccine. And
Uh,
their stories, it's really incredible. I mean, months and months of their teams working round the clock shifts, no days off, because like all of us, they're watching the counts, and the counts, they
Mhm.
felt their work so directly related to those numbers they were seeing.
Yeah.
I get chills, like, and yeah, I get chills just talking about it. But that ability to, um, when we really focus and have just that, everything else falls away, and the
Mhm.
priority is so clear, that tremendous amount of energy and attention and what can be accomplished in such a short amount of time. It's a shame it doesn't feel sustainable all the time to achieve
Right.
those kinds of amazing things, that quickly, but it sounds like you all had that same kind of focus and ability to expand. And I love you talking about partnering with another organization and kind of
Yeah.
saying, like, for now, at least, we're not competing in any way. We're splitting coverage and trying to just get access and information to as many people as possible.
Well, so I'll say this, like, what I know for sure is that, some of the most innovative, scrappy, agile organizations, and definitely in the nation, in the world, are nonprofits. Because when you think about it, the average nonprofit doesn't have like millions and millions of dollars. All aren't the Red Cross and ones that are household names. But they are the ones that are trying to meet their communities where they are in the best ways that they can with with as little with little resources as they have.
Yeah.
So when you think about program implementation, how you communicate, um, you know, a Philadelphia fight was blessed because they were probably one of the few organizations that could even afford a comms person as a non,
Yeah.
because unfortunately it's as where the industry is going, communications is a nice to have, not a need to have, and you and I both know that we are always a need to have. um
Perception and reality are two very different things, right? Yeah.
Right. So every organization doesn't invest in comms, but when things like COVID-19 happen, or when crises happen, the comms folks are the first that they call. So, they were lucky to have the budget to have a comms professional like myself and others who've worked in the organization. But I'll say, even without that person to communicate all the great work, nonprofits do in my opinion, God's work.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so I want to kind of continue on your career journey a little bit. So
Mhm.
there's a common thread of working within the HIV portfolio and with those communities. Um, but you decided to go industry side. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that transition for you.
So it was funny, about maybe year 2 or year 3 when I was at Philadelphia Fight, my godmother had said to me, she's like, "Evan, I have a feeling that one of these, like, pharma companies are gonna find you." And I was like, "Please." Like, I've worked in nonprofits my entire career. There is nothing that a pharma company would want from me. And, and even, like, at myself around, like, year 5, I started questioning, like, "Okay, so I've been at Fight 5 years." At this time, I was, like, an associate director. I was, like, the number 2 of our comms team. I'm like, there's nowhere for me to go. So I need to start thinking about like what I wanted to do next. And I enrolled in Georgetown's executive MBA program. And then a couple of months after enrolling, there was my boss retired, and I ended up becoming director of the team. And so I'm like, okay, I'm growing and I'm happy as director, but I'm still trying to see like what else is out there. Because my fear was, okay, so I become director of comms at Philadelphia Fight. Am I just going to be on this like rolling machine of being a director of comms at various nonprofits where I'm just like lifting and shifting from company to company with the same title? I didn't really want that. And so a friend of mine sent me this link and she was like, Evan, I found the perfect job for you. And it was this role at Merck. And I said, okay, this is great. It sounds just like me, but there's no way in hell Merck would hire me. But because it was still that thing of, okay, I'm not like, I have way too much nonprofit experience, no corporate experience at all. For a pharma company, one of the most regulated industries in the world, to want somebody like me. But then I spoke to the recruiter. The recruiter literally said, "You're exactly what we're looking for." And I said,
Amazing.
"Oh, well, this is interesting." So it was, and she said, she's like, we need someone who knows the community and can speak to the community. And I think you can do it. You have your educational and professional acumen to do this job. And that's what I did for 4 years. So started as the community engagement point, supporting the community liaisons, and then ended my tenure, which is, kind of leads me to where I am now, which was leading their consumer marketing, at Merck for their HIV products, which I love doing. Um, so I mean, it was such an amazing experience. I learned a lot. I think it was like my on the ground training and working in pharma. Because I had and nonprofits had no, I don't want to say no regulation, because there's grants that have to report and things, but it's nothing like it's nothing like like the review process or the regulatory process of pharma. So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, wait, I have to talk to a lawyer about a
Everything.
program, everything, right? Like, this is new to me, but I'll figure it out. And that's exactly what I did. And I'm very grateful that Merck gave me the bandwidth, to try things and to learn and to build those relationships. So yeah, like I really enjoyed, like, my Merck experience. Did I answer your question? Did I
Yeah,
think like what?
definitely.
Yeah,
And I there's a little bit more that I want to save for our one big idea section
yeah.
around some of the populations that you served at Merck and how they may
Hmm.
have differed. But um, you're in a new role
Yeah.
today, and it's my understanding is this is you work on a drug for psoriatic arthritis,
Yes.
probably very different patient populations. So I'd love to hear on kind of a conceptual level, like how you had deep experience, right? For, almost a dozen years, it sounds like, kind of in one focus area.
Hmm.
How did you go about saying, I've got to learn a new medication, but also a new patient population, new set of needs, new set of sort of other factors to consider? What did that process look like for you?
Mm. For me, it was actually very similar to my HIV experience, which
Okay.
was, okay, so first of all, who's the patient? But more importantly, like, what are they going through? So what are their medical, but more important to me, yes, their medical challenges are one thing, but their socioeconomic challenges are another. So that's how we meet patients or meet consumers holistically, and how we shape our message to meet whatever their individual unmet needs are. But I also like to think of pharma consumer marketing as something additional. There's something additional I like to think of. So when the consumer is not thinking about HIV or psoriatic arthritis in oncology, because we are people, we have jobs, we have responsibilities, we have kids, we have hobbies. So when we're not thinking about these things, like, so when they're not thinking of taking their medication or going to the doctor's office, what are they doing? Or what do they wanna do where this medical conditions preventing them from doing. So that's how I like to paint the picture of the ideal patient or the patients in focus. And you create campaigns, you create programming, you create visuals that meet that the goal, their individual goals, their challenges or whatever of those patients in focus.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's a great segue into our one big idea section.
Hmm.
So every episode we cover one insight, experience, or aspect of your work that's had a meaningful impact on how you communicate.
Hmm.
And we talked about your one big idea, which is storytelling, especially around marginalized communities or niche kind of segments as a through line of your career. Um, so I do want to like follow on with the recent conversation, but I think I want to
Yeah.
step back first and
Hmm.
tell me a little bit about what that through line looks like and um why it matters to you.
Hmm. I For me, a story is a before and after. So there's like the who was this person before, what's the pivotal moment, and then what happens afterwards. And so every everybody wants that pivotal moment or wants to encounter some type of pivotal moment that makes their life better. When I was a nonprofit communications professional, it was that pivotal moment might have been a service that an organization offered. It might have been um a diagnosis from an HIV test. It might have been, when I was working at Achievability, getting housing so that you can go to school. Like there's always that pivotal moment that someone has. And working in the pharma and at a pharma company, it's our product and how our product is making someone's life better. That's what we do, and that's what we should always want to demonstrate somehow. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to tell real life stories. So going back to that prep news story that I helped put together, gosh, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, my God. Um, Gosh, I was 26 years old and couldn't tell me anything. And like I just remember the news journalist who's still a dear friend of mine, and the producer interviewing those young, because I believe the prep program participants that we interviewed at the time were maybe like 19 or 20. And we interviewed them and asked them how, like, why prep was so important for them. Because, and they talked about how HIV has always been a deep fear, being young Black gay men and having friends who were getting who were seroconverting, like, they were becoming, they were contracting the virus, and they didn't want that to be them. So that's why they enrolled in the program. It gave them more confidence to be gay and experiment and all those things. So that's why, and people needed to people need to hear those type of stories. I'll never forget, because again, like, this was a point where nobody knew what prep was. So I sent the news story to like all my friends, partially because I'm like, hey guys, I made it to
Sure.
TV. I'm producing feature stories now. But also like, okay, hey, this is something that us as like young Black professionals need to know about. And like I remember the text like, okay, like we are young and educated and we have degrees, but we've never heard of prep. So this is important to me, even though I'm not in like core target market and all that stuff. It was nice to know. And you never know, like, with a story, like, who you're going to impact. And as you know, like, I'm into performing arts. And the studio that I'm a part of, they're getting like media attention and whatnot because they're the only adult dance studio in the Philadelphia region. And I think and what I've shared to my teacher and studio owner is that, you built a community of, like, the pivotal moment is that, one, you found folks who still love dance, but the pivotal moment is them realizing they can still dance, and one, that they're not alone. And with every, like, news story that comes out, her phone, constantly rings, because there's people out there who realize that, oh my god, this is something I've always wanted to do. I'm not alone. I'm not crazy, because that's why, stories do that. You kind of realize that you're not alone, or, you're not as much of a unicorn as you thought that you thought you were. So it allows you to connect with other people, with other connect with other experiences, and makes you feel less alone. So, that's the power of storytelling, and I think that us as communicators, we need to invest more in storytelling, um, but do it in unique ways, because we have so many channels now. There's Reddit, and there's TikTok, and there's Facebook and Instagram, and there's podcasts like we're doing now. There are so many ways to, like, get stories out, because you never know, like, what pivotal moments are out there that need to be that can impact others, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I want to pull on the thread of the arts for a second and dance specifically. So, I have a performing arts background, and it's interesting. As soon as you said like the only adult dance studio, I started thinking because when I lived in New York City, I took classes at like Broadway dance and
Hmm.
Alvin Ailey, and I was
Yeah.
an adult, but I was full of other adults and lots of like professionals. Um, and I never thought twice about it. But like here in Tampa where I live, it's
Hmm.
definitely like it's kind of how I feel going into I take piano lessons and, like, the person after me is 7, and,
Hmm.
like, it's fine. It's totally
Yes.
fine. I love my
Uh-huh.
teacher. It's great, um, but there is something in, like, even that, and that's such an interesting way of sort of, like, slicing a segment and being like,
Yes.
these people don't necessarily feel seen. In many other
Yes.
dimensions, maybe they have great representation in the world, but in this
Hmm.
way of wanting to go express themselves creatively, maybe they're not seen or don't feel comfortable, like, taking class alongside, a 9-year-old,
Hmm.
and the 9-year-old's better than them. Um
I've been there.
Yeah, so I love that.
And
Um,
and and I
uh
wanna shout out the studio. I wanna, like, name them, like,
yeah,
Second Chance Dance, owned by Elisa Bowser, who was an angel, and I believe that entrepreneurship is also can be another form of, like, doing God's work, because you're offering a service that someone needs, and they may be too busy or whatnot to do, and you're providing that help. But just the community that she's built, the supportive community, because you and I
yeah.
both know in performing arts it is not always
Not
supportive.
always, can't take that for granted. That's right, that's right.
Yeah, so I definitely want to share that. Uplift Elisa in SCD. But yeah, like, you're right. Like, my best friend. She takes guitar lessons, and I have friends who take Pilates, and we want to do things that make us feel more alive, more in tune with ourselves, and sometimes it's more than just going to the gym. It's as small as taking a walk. For me, it's going to dance class. For my best friend, is is um taking guitar lessons. For you, and maybe auditioning for a musical, a theater performance in Tampa. Like, people want to experience things,
Yeah.
and a lot of us want to either correct childhood or reclaim it in some way too.
Mhm.
And I think that's another thing that Elisa kind of learned. There are some people possibly just could not afford certain things as a child, but you always had that interest. Like, I had
Yeah.
a very long interest, a long positive and negative story with dance, as someone who was more full figured, someone who's a male who loved dance. And
Mhm.
that's not socially acceptable. So there's tons of reasons why we do certain things as a hobby, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I want to tie this to, when you think about like marketing a particular medication, and you talked about wanting to understand the full sort of environment that someone's going through. And yet there's this tension, right, of there might be advocacy programs or programs through medical affairs and other support programs, but it- you can't fix everything for them, right?
Right.
Like, and so
Hmm.
how do you think about being sort of responsible with that, and understanding everything they're going through, but also sort of staying within the lane of what kind of support you can offer, or maybe within like the organization collaborating with, Med Affairs or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge and a balance that we as pharma communications and marketing communication professionals always try to, that we're always facing. There's always this desire to want to do more. But it may be illegal, right? For us to do more.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's sometimes you just have to really like say it just like that. Um, and figure out like within the boxes where you play how best you can serve the communities where
Mhm.
you are. Um, what you can't do is like succumb to the guilt. Um,
I call that over responsibility,
yeah,
where, and as an entrepreneur myself, I don't necessarily have the "it's illegal" kind of
right.
constraints, right,
Uh-huh.
around extra help or feeling like I take all of that on, but it's something I've had to work on as I get older and mature as a business owner, is like you said, say, "I'm helping in this way, and I'm very
Hmm.
committed to that, but I can't feel guilty about the other pieces," and it has to be a shared, responsibility. Now that's a little bit different from what we're
Well,
talking about
but
here, but
no, but here's the thing, like with what I, because I have this, I am not brave enough to be an entrepreneur. I've learned that. I've tried it. It is a thing, a muscle. Maybe I'll build someday. So kudos to you
oh,
and your
thank
fellow
you.
entrepreneurs and those who are listening. But I think a big challenge that you all face is that you know, you want to help everybody, but everybody may not be able to afford or and you have bills to pay. Some entrepreneurs have kids and college tuitions to support, and
Mhm.
daycare is astronomical from from my, so
Yes.
you have to take care of your own needs too. So there's that what is it, that the famous line from the airplane, and you have to put your mask on before helping someone else. So you all face similar challenges too, where you can't do everything for everyone, but you have to choose like what's best for you in order to help as many people as you can. And I think that's where we are in pharma. So we have our we again, we talk to a lot of lawyers, and we lawyers and compliance folks who help shape like and tell us what we can and can't do, and we play and we maximize like where we can. And again, we have to learn how to do it without guilt.
Yeah.
And you could try to push, as much as you can, but the more important part is to try to not do it, is to do those things without guilt.
Yeah, yeah, appreciate that. Um, Last question I wanted to ask here. So, we talked about working with, often marginalized or niche populations. How do you think about telling the stories of those folks in a way that, um, gives them dignity, is respectful, doesn't maybe tip into feeling like exploitative?
Hmm.
Like, I imagine that's a balance you're considering as well, as you said, I can't think the word, like uplifting those stories.
Hmm.
So how do you navigate that?
I believe that subjects are vehicles. So, when you have a subject, if you have like a quote unquote star of a story, it's your responsibility to make sure that they are comfortable enough to tell their story from from a pure and honest and safe space. Um, things can I've been in situations where subjects just are not ready to tell their story, and
Yeah.
considering the very like stigmatized and some of the rough spaces where I've worked, that's totally understandable. But that's where proper planning prevents poor performance comes in. You have to do your diligence, you have to get to know your subjects. um you got to ask them, like, how they're doing. So it's just making sure that that person is safe enough,
Yeah.
and comfortable and confident enough to share their stories. Everybody isn't. In the HIV community, everybody is not comfortable in sharing their status for a large amount of reasons.
Yeah,
You
sure.
know, you, it's one of the most stigmatized these therapeutic areas within healthcare. So, there's reasons why someone will want to keep that to themselves, and it's okay. No one has to tell their stories to anybody and everybody, but for those who are, it is responsible. You have to make sure you do it in a space where that person is can do it from a comfortable space. Make sure that there aren't any inappropriate questions. Make sure that they aren't. Make sure, but that their statements are truthful.
Mm.
Right? Like all of those things are you do in the planning phase. So when it's time to elevate their story, you absolutely can. And then they're prepped and they're ready, and they feel proud of telling their story, because storytelling should be empowering.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
shouldn't be, okay, I told my story, now I feel miserable and feel like I'm, it's vulnerable, yes, and thinking about, Brene Brown's work, but yes, it's a vulnerable experience, but the way you do that is to make sure that this deeply transparent, vulnerable experience is powerful, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that because I do a lot of work with like B2B customer
Mhm.
stories and case studies, and we always position that as like our client's customer is that's the hero, right? And we're not saying that our client is the only thing responsible for their massive success. That one that gets a lot of egos involved,
Uh-huh.
but it is that feeling of this should be mutually beneficial. So I love that you talk about in terms of the patient, it's that feeling of empowerment that is the benefit they're getting, and it should
Uh-huh.
feel um they're like a really positive experience for them, not just a benefit to the company getting the great
Right.
story to retell and share. Yeah.
And it's so funny how, clients, and whatnot, we always want to be like the headline, but isn't it more impactful being or describing ourselves and from that pivotal moment
Yeah,
perspective? Like
exactly.
we are part of the reason that this person went from A to B.
Mhm.
We helped get them their goals and help them do X, Y, and Z. That's better than
And I think
having a whole
it
story
has
about
to
it.
be enough because at the end of the day, right, the patient's the one who walked in the door to get the test, or the patient's the one who decided to take the medication consistently or got the diagnosis and took a next step. Like you can't ever claim all of that,
Right.
nor should you, right? It should be enough to be part of that journey. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I love
And
that.
I think like Harvard Business Review does that like very well. I mean, I would say every major like media outlet that's built on storytelling does that very, very well. Like they know that it's about like the A to B journey,
Mhm.
and there's numerous things and people and companies and products that help make that transition, and those need to be equally highlighted as well. But again, we're part of someone's journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. All right. I think we're going to leave it there. Thank you for really, really thoughtful discussion in this area. I want to move us into our lightning round segment. This is the last word. So
Okay.
every guest on the show gets these same 5 questions. You just go with your gut, quick answer on these.
Hmm.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Question 1. What's your favorite word to say out loud?
Ooh. Yes.
Love that. Question 2. What's a word you know from reading, but you're not quite sure how to pronounce it?
That's a tough one. Um, hmm. Ooh, that's a really tough one. A word that I may not be able
Or
to
sometimes for folks, it's like a word that you just stumble over no matter what.
specifically. That's
Specifically?
yeah. That's a key one for me. I always that or if like if there's like an alliterative moment, and so if there's like numerous words that have like the same
Mhm.
letter, I always that's always a tongue twister
Get
for me.
tongue-tied?
Yeah.
Tongue-tied? Great, perfect.
Yes.
Question 3, one phrase or saying you wish could be retired for good.
I just want to help people.
Okay.
It's okay. So okay, I just want to help people, but how and why?
Yeah, so it's not
You know,
enough. Yeah,
it's not enough.
yeah.
It's sure, and I think everybody wants to help people. That's not going to separate you from anyone else. I think we are in a space now where if you don't know how and why you're here to serve, you got to figure it out.
It's interesting you say that, and I know these are supposed to be the lightning round questions, but that's okay. It's
Uh-huh.
my show, so I I think a lot about I think a lot about mental load as a mother of 2 small children and invisible work and the ways in which language can subtly shift the load, right? So for example, the most classic example is when someone says something and just ends an email with thoughts. And it's like they've just taken that whatever and like dumped it in your lap to figure out what to do next. What are they
Hmm.
asking? Like they didn't do the work of here's what I'd like you to think about, or here's what I'm looking for feedback on, or and it's like it's just kind of like I took the mental load of it and just shoved it your way. So that almost reminds me of that. Like
Hmm.
I want to help, okay, but now somebody else has to figure out how you can do that. Like, maybe that's part of kind of what's baked in there is like you've got to, as you're saying, take it to the next step of like, here's what I'm thinking, or here's how I can get involved. So,
To
yeah.
me, it just makes it shows me that that person doesn't know what their gift is yet, and they need
Mm,
to like spend time trying to figure that out. I had a conversation with a mentee when I was in Dallas last week, and it was clear to me that she either forgot what it was or needs to find out what it is.
yeah, that's so interesting. All right, question 4. What's a communication practice or principle that's non-negotiable for you?
Storytelling.
Love it. What's the last thing you read, heard, or watched that really stuck with you?
I am reading a book called The Nine Myths About Working. It was
Ooh,
suggested by my boss at our team meeting a couple of months ago, and that's what I'm reading now.
awesome, awesome. Have to find out how it is when you're done with it.
Yes.
Evan, thank you so much for joining us today. If our listeners want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Evan Burton, EVON, BURTON. Always looking forward to connecting with people.
Perfect. Thank you again. Great conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Expertly Said. We're produced by Every Little Word, a boutique content and communications agency. If you like what you heard, you know what to do. Subscribe, share the episode with a colleague, or leave us a review. If you want to connect with me directly, please do. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Kristen Sweeney. Thanks for listening. Talk soon.